Rochdale, we've had Rotherham, now we've got Oxfordshire. I'm not surprised by it. I don't think there's any doubt that these types of crimes have been committed in lots of different local authority areas right across the country. What is disappointing is that there's a similar pattern of neglect in terms of dealing with the issue, and that's what we've seen, whether it's the police or whether it's council officers having a particular culture within their organisations that's ignored these victims for too long.
Well, yes, Anne Coffey, why do you think that the system has let these girls down?
Well, I think it was very much to do with attitudes to those children by children's services and the police, the agencies that were there to protect them. They basically saw these children as child prostitutes, they basically saw them as making choices, and therefore when those children tried to talk about their experiences, they were dismissed and ignored. And very much to do with a very, very bad culture in children's services and the police.
David Derbyshire, is that how you recognise it? These girls weren't believed, they weren't taken seriously, and there seemed to be a general lack of understanding by those whose help they sought of actually what was happening, what was going on. This issue, the whole issue of consent, they didn't seem to understand it.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think those are the issues. I think the most telling lesson from the case that we've heard about today is the need to listen to children, to hear children, to view young people as children. And when we say listen to children, not just to hear their words, but to hear them see their actions as well.
Well, yes, and where does this come from? Because one of the instances that's been picked out in our reports there was a girl who went to the police and she had blood all over her, and yet she was sent away. I mean, how much, where does ignorance end? I mean, this does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? I mean, any kind of training shouldn't be needed for this.
The details, obviously, of the cases are shocking, as they always are shocking, and I think that clearly we need to ensure that, and Oxfordshire have been very keen to point out what they've done since the cases came to an end. We need to ensure that teenagers who are in need are treated as children first and foremost.
And Anne Coffey, would you say there is a similarity between the different areas, the kind of behaviour that we've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these reviews refer to a time before 2010, and I think without doubt before 2010 children were disbelieved. There were children who were systematically raped and abused, and nobody listened to their experiences, and if they did, they thought they were just asking for it. But I think there's been a lot of progress since 2010. There's an increasing awareness about what sexual exploitation and grooming is. But I think we need to do more, and we need to do more in engaging the wider communities and the public in our fight against tackling child sexual exploitation.
Simon Danchuk, at the beginning you did say that you thought this was an issue. Obviously these three areas have been highlighted, but you thought it was a more widespread problem than that. Would you agree that things have changed, or do you think that we still do have a problem?
No, well, these types of crimes will still get committed. There are perpetrators out there that are intent on committing these types of crimes, and that's why the agencies have to get better. And I think there has been improvement. If you look at Rochdale, there's been a revolution in terms of improving children's services and protecting children. Very much better service provision. But that has to be consistent right across the country, and I suspect some authorities are still in denial. And I'd also make the point that Ofsted, who have the job of regulating children's services, investigating whether they're successful or not, clearly failed in Rotherham, probably failed in Rochdale. Is that regulator good enough to find out what's going on in different local authority areas which haven't been exposed yet?
David Derbyshire, do you still think that there are areas still in denial?
Well, I think we refer to Ofsted. Ofsted did publish a report just earlier this year reviewing child sexual exploitation across a number of authorities, and confirmed that actually there were variable practices in those different authorities. Some very good practices keeping young people safe, but it wasn't consistent across all the authorities that they viewed.
OK, Anne Coffey, what's your reaction to David Cameron's suggestion today of making it a crime, extending this crime of willful neglect to people that work in services that are meant to protect children? Will that make a difference, do you think? Well, how people work?
I think it's a very strong message of accountability and responsibility. It's a very strong message to senior managers and to counsellors that they should take an interest in what is happening to children in their area, and they share responsibility for making sure children are protected. And that sends a very strong message about that.
And yet, Simon Danchuk, were that the law now, or had been the law when these events went on in Oxford, no one would have been found guilty, no one would have been charged according to this report.
Yeah, and I've been campaigning along with others for the mandatory reporting of child abuse, and it's an important step. The government are consulting on this idea of willful neglect offence. I wonder whether they're setting the bar too high, whether it needs to be slightly lower, so that if professionals or officials suspect child abuse, then they have an obligation to report it. So the wording of it will be absolutely critical. They have to get that right, but I'm worried that willful neglect is too high a bar.
Well, David Derbyshire, how do you think it could affect the job of social workers and their recruitment as well? Do you think they would worry that they'd spend more time trying to be detectives rather than doing that actual care work?
Well, I think that's the worry, but on the other hand, I think it's absolutely right that we should have clear accountability arrangements, and I think within the consultation period we have to work hard to ensure that we've got the balance right between use of the law and other means of accountability.
OK, well, we must leave it there. David Derbyshire, Simon Danshuk and Anne Coffey, thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.